In this market update, you'll see that socialism causes inflation. Hi, Jim Gore from THOR Wealth Management. Well, there's a lot of talk here in the United States about socialism, but socialism, we have to look at it from an economic standpoint, especially from an inflationary standpoint. We did a market update almost 3 years ago, August 24th, 2023, and the link is on this page, as well as it will be on the bottom of this video that you can go to that link to look at what we were talking about with modern monetary theory. And this was a theory that was espoused, and we saw the ramifications of it here in the United States with higher inflation a few years back. So what is modern monetary theory? Basically, it's a macroeconomic theory that says that countries that control their own currencies, like the US, are not constrained by revenues when it comes to government spending. In other words, you can just print more and more money out there. And that is what happens under socialism. So if you look at socialism, it is actually MMT on steroids. Now let's just look at a good example. And this has happened just in our hemisphere a few years back. When Hugo Chavez took over Venezuela, he had a lot of socialist things to say, and he was a socialist. Let's look at some of his quotes. Capitalism is destroying the world. I'm convinced that the path to new, better, and possible world is not capitalism, but the path is socialism. Sounds a lot like a number of candidates that are out there today. The only way to save the world is through socialism, but a socialism within a democracy. There is no dictatorship here. And I would highly recommend that you listen to a podcast that does a great job talking about dictators around the globe throughout history called Real Dictators. And it gives you their history, great podcast. And a lot of socialism have gone to be dictators just like Hugo Chavez ended up being. And then he also says, we must reduce all emissions that are destroying the planet. However, that requires a change in lifestyle, a change in economic model. We must go from capitalism to socialism. Now that's kind of funny that this is coming from Venezuela that has the world's largest oil reserves, but it used the green agenda to cause more regulations, to cause more socialism, and that is what happened. So what happened under Hugo Chavez when they did this? So he printed more money, and there's more regulations, more control of the economy from the state, if you will. And look what happened to inflation. You had inflation, this is under Hugo Chavez, under 13 years of his rule, inflation is up 300%. When you have inflation up 300%, what happens to the quality of life of the individuals that are there? It falls. Under socialism, that's why you have socialism failing, is because they use this modern monetary theory. They print more and more money, they overregulate, and what happens is the ordinary people, the cost of living goes up so high that they can't afford to live anymore. Now you might say, well, Jim, that's one example. Can you give another? Well, let's just use what we have here in the United States as a good example of capitalism versus socialism. We're not a socialist society, but we have states that lean that way. And one of the most prominent one is California. They're more green, they have more regulation, more taxes, compared to Texas, which is more capitalistic and less regulations. And because of that, you can see this is a great website that's called mylifeelsewhere.com. And if you're a retiree looking to move to another state, highly recommend you look at this before you move to that state. And you can see here that the cost of living in Texas in total is about 17% less than it is in California. And it's in all categories. Restaurants, 11% cheaper in Texas. Groceries, 19% cheaper. Transportation, 12% cheaper. Housing, 22% cheaper. You're raising a family, 31% cheaper for childcare. Sports and entertainment, 21% cheaper. The only one that's not very big is clothing. It's at 0.5%. So just looking at here in the United States, you can see that overregulation, more control of your economy ends up costing people more and their standard of living goes down. And that is what happens with socialism. It's going to add to inflation. and it's going to add to more regulations, and quality of life will go down. It's happened in every society that has instituted a socialistic society. If you have any questions or need help with your portfolio, as always, give us a call or reach out to us at thorwealthmanagement.com. Take care and talk to you in a couple weeks.
Subscribe to the THOR channel today.